The moment the wine glass left Victoria's hand, time seemed to slow down. I saw the burgundy liquid arc through the air like blood, and I knew, in that instant, that my life in this house would never be the same. Not because of the cut it left on my cheek, but because of what it revealed about the people I loved most, and what I was willing to accept from them. Before I begin my story, I want to thank you for being here. This story is filled with truth, betrayal, love, and redemption. Each story touches the soul and reveals what really happens behind closed doors, the things we don't talk about at family gatherings, the pain we hide behind polite smiles. Before I begin, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, please consider subscribing to Grandma True Stories. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse and family dysfunction. Now, let me tell you what really happened. My name is Margaret Eleanor Whitmore, though most people call me Maggie. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived long enough to know that life rarely turns out the way you plan it. It all started 3 months ago when I had a scare. Nothing serious, really. My doctor said it was just my blood pressure acting up. But it was enough to scare me. I was living alone in the house my late husband Tom and I bought 40 years ago. The house felt too big, too quiet. Every creaking floorboard reminded me that I was by myself, that Tom was gone. That time was moving forward whether I was ready or not. My son James called me the day after my doctor's appointment. He'd always been a good boy, still is, I suppose, though boy seems wrong for a man in his mid-40s. He was worried about me, he said. He didn't want me alone anymore. He wanted me to move in with him and his wife Victoria. I should have heard the hesitation in his voice. I should have listened to the tiny alarm bell ringing in the back of my mind. But I didn't. I heard only that my son wanted me, that he was concerned, that I wouldn't be alone anymore. At 68 after losing your husband, that sounds like paradise. It wasn't. James and Victoria lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs. One of those modern mansions with clean lines and marble floors that echoes when you walk through it. Victoria had decorated it to look like a magazine spread, everything white, gray, or black. No warmth, no life. Just aesthetics and perfection. The first week was fine. Victoria was cold but polite. She showed me to my room, a lovely guest suite, she called it, as if I were a visitor instead of family, and said I could make myself comfortable. James hugged me and looked relieved, like he'd solved a major problem by bringing me here. I unpacked my things carefully. I'd brought photo albums, a few of Tom's sweaters that still smelled like his cologne, some quilts my mother had made. I tried to make the space feel like home. By the second week, I realized that was a mistake. Your things are making the place look cluttered, Victoria said one morning as I was arranging photos on the dresser. She was standing in my doorway, impeccable as always, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her workout clothes designer brands I couldn't afford. This is a modern home. We like to keep things minimal. I put the photos away. By the third week, the pattern had become clear. James was at work most days. He ran a tech company that demanded his attention. Victoria stayed home, ostensibly working on her wellness business, which seemed to involve taking expensive classes and posting photos of smoothie bowls on Instagram. And me, I became the help. It started small. Maggie, would you mind making lunch? I have a pilot's class. Then it became Maggie, the house is a mess. Could you tidy up? And then, Maggie, I'm having friends over. Can you make sure everything is perfect? I didn't mind at first. I'm a woman who likes to be useful. I'd spent 50 years taking care of a household. It gave me something to do, a sense of purpose. But Victoria never thanked me. She never acknowledged the work. Worse, she began to act like I was obligated to serve her. Like I was staff she'd acquired along with the guest room. One day, I made a pot roast for dinner. It was an old family recipe. Tom had loved it. I spent all afternoon on it, knowing James would appreciate a home-cooked meal. When we sat down to eat, Victoria took one bite and pushed her plate away. I'm vegetarian this month, she announced. Didn't James tell you? You should have asked. She didn't eat. She just sat there, sipping her wine, while James and I ate in uncomfortable silence. I felt the sting of that rejection like a physical blow. I'd made that meal with love. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I didn't know. Well, now you do, she said, not looking at me. The comments became more pointed after that. Whenever I was in a room, Victoria would mention how tiring it was to have a house guest, how demanding it was to have someone else's schedule to think about, how she valued her personal space and privacy. James never said anything. He'd just look down at his plate and pretend he hadn't heard. I started eating my meals in my room. It seemed easier. By the 3rd month, I was cleaning the entire house, cooking all the meals, doing all the laundry, and running all the errands. Victoria had somehow managed to convince me, or perhaps I'd convinced myself, that this was the price of living here. This was what I owed them for taking me in. I didn't realize I was being taken advantage of until my friend Susan called me one Tuesday afternoon. "How's it going with James and Victoria?" she asked. "Fine," I said automatically. "It's fine, Maggie." Susan's voice had that tone, the one she used when she knew I was lying. We'd been friends for 43 years. She could see through me. What's really going on? I almost didn't tell her. But something about hearing her voice, someone who actually cared about me, broke something open inside. And I told her everything. The dismissal, the demands, the way Victoria treated me like invisible help instead of family. "That's not okay," Susan said firmly. "You're not her maid, Maggie. You're her mother-in-law." "I know," I said. And I felt tears starting. "But James, I don't want to cause problems between them. And Victoria, she's unhappy. I can tell. Maybe if I just—" "Maybe nothing," Susan interrupted. "You need to stand up for yourself." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to march into that living room and tell Victoria exactly what I thought of her treatment. But I didn't. I was afraid. Afraid of causing conflict. Afraid of being thrown out. Afraid that if I said something, James would have to choose between me and his wife and I'd lose him. So I stayed silent. That silence is what led to the dinner on a Friday night in October. Ta Dioneer Victoria had invited some of her friends over. Wealthy women in their 40s who discussed their personal trainers and their vacation homes with the kind of detail usually reserved for discussing children. They were sitting around the marble dining table, wine glasses in hand, while I served appetizers and cleared plates. I was invisible to them, literally invisible. They spoke around me as if I weren't there. I was furniture. Useful furniture, but furniture nonetheless. James was at the table too, looking uncomfortable in his own home. Making conversation with people he clearly didn't care about. He caught my eye once and looked away. Near the end of the meal, as I was clearing the main course, Victoria's wine glass was nearly empty. She'd been drinking steadily all evening. I'd watched her go through 3 glasses already. "Maggie?" she called out, her voice sharp and demanding. "Pour me more wine." I was standing right there, so I reached for the bottle. But something inside me, something that had been building for 3 months, something Susan's words had awakened, made me pause. "I think you've had enough," I said quietly. The table went silent. Victoria stared at me like I'd slapped her. Her friends stopped mid-conversation. James's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "Excuse me?" Victoria's voice was low and dangerous. I knew I should back down. Every instinct told me to apologize, to pour the wine, to smooth things over. But I was tired. So tired of being treated like I didn't matter. "I said I think you've had enough wine," I repeated, keeping my voice calm but firm. Victoria stood up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Her face was flushed, her eyes blazing with something I'd never seen before. Not just anger, but something deeper. Rage. Humiliation. Fury at being challenged. "How dare you," she hissed. "How dare you tell me what to do in my own home? You're nobody, Maggie. Do you understand that? You're not family. You're help. You're a maid. And maids obey." The words hung in the air like poison. "Maids must obey!" she screamed. And then she grabbed her wine glass, the one I'd refused to refill, and threw it at my face. I didn't have time to react. One moment I was standing there, and the next, the glass was hitting my cheek. I felt the impact, then the warm trickle of blood, then the sting of the wine on the cut. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion and at lightning speed simultaneously. Victoria's friends gasped. One of them stood up. James shouted, "Victoria!" "No," and pushed his chair back so hard it fell over. But I just stood there, my hand to my face, feeling the blood, feeling the shock, feeling something break inside me that I didn't know was still holding together. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" Victoria looked almost drunk with her own rage. "Get out of the room," I said. Louder this time. My voice was steady, but it came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere that had finally had enough. "Get out right now, or I will leave this house tonight, and I will tell every person you know exactly what you are." Victoria's face went pale. For a moment, I thought she might lunge at me. But then James grabbed her arm. "Enough," he said, and his voice held something I'd never heard before: strength. Authority. "That's enough, Victoria." She jerked her arm away and stormed out of the room, her friends scrambling to follow her. whispering frantically among themselves. James stood there, looking at the broken glass on the floor, at the blood on my face, at the spilled wine pooling on his marble table. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said. "I'm so." But I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about the next morning. About what needed to happen. About what I'd realized in that moment when the glass hit my face. I had a choice to make. And I decided. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my room with a cold compress against my cheek, watching the swelling go down slightly, trying to decide what to do. Leave. Stay and fight. Call James and demand an apology. Every option felt wrong. Every option felt like it would end badly. Around midnight, I heard Victoria and James arguing in their bedroom down the hall. Her voice was shrill and defensive. His was tired and sad. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the tone. Disappointment, resignation, frustration. Then silence. Then the sound of a door closing. By 2 a.m, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to leave. Not yet. But I also wasn't going to let this stand. There had to be another way. Something between surrender and confrontation. Something that would make Victoria understand what she'd done. Not through anger, but through understanding. I needed to know why. Why was Victoria like this? Why did she hate me so much? Why did she treat anyone, with such cruelty? There had to be a reason. People don't just wake up one day deciding to be awful. Something had to have broken them first. I got out of bed and looked at my face in the mirror. The cut was small, but it was visible. There would be a bruise. I'd have to answer questions from Susan, from my doctor, from anyone who saw me. The shame I felt wasn't for the cut. It was for staying silent for 3 months. For accepting this treatment. For letting myself become invisible. But shame could wait. First, I needed answers. I knew James kept a small office downstairs off the main living room. Victoria had a sitting room that she used for her online business. Ordering things, posting on social media, that sort of thing. If there was anywhere Victoria kept personal things, documents, anything that might tell me about her, it would be in one of those rooms. I put on my robe and moved quietly down the hallway. The house was dark, lit only by the nightlight near the kitchen. My heart was pounding. I felt like a burglar in my own son's home, sneaking around like I didn't belong there. Which apparently I didn't. Victoria's sitting room was exactly what I expected, all soft grays and whites, with an expensive desk facing the window. Carefully curated bookshelves. I suspected most of the books had never been opened, and a small side table with a television. Everything looked staged, like it was from a catalog. I hesitated at the door. This felt wrong, private, invasive, but then I thought of the glass hitting my face. I thought of 3 months of being invisible. I thought of Victoria's voice saying, "You're a maid." I went in. The desk drawers were mostly empty, a few pens, some notepads, chargers for various devices. Nothing personal. I moved to the bookshelf and found mostly decorating books and wellness guides. Nothing revealing. Then I saw it, a small wooden box on the top shelf, pushed into the corner. The kind of box you'd keep jewelry in, or important papers. I stood on my tiptoes and reached for it. Inside was a leather journal. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed slightly. I opened it carefully, and I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Victoria's, but younger, looser, less controlled. The first entry was dated 18 years ago. Mom did it again. She said she was proud of me, then immediately criticized my weight. "You have such a pretty face, Victoria, but you'd be stunning if you lost 10 pounds. As if I'm a project to be fixed instead of a person." Dad just sat there and said nothing. He never says anything. I hate them both. I sat down on the edge of Victoria's pristine sofa and kept reading. Entry after entry revealed a young woman, 24 at the time, living with parents who never seemed satisfied. A mother who offered backhanded compliments and constant criticism. A father who was emotionally absent. A girl desperate for approval that never came. "I got promoted at work today. It's a big deal. More money, more responsibility." I called Mom to tell her. Her first question was, "Does it require more hours? You already work too much?" Not congratulations. Not "I'm proud of you." Just criticism and concern. Why did I even bother calling? I'm taking a break from dating. Men are exhausting. They either want me to be someone I'm not, or they don't want me at all. Why is it so hard to just be accepted for who you are? Mom says I'm too picky. Of course she does. I kept reading, and the portrait that emerged was heartbreaking. Victoria had been lonely. Desperate for love and acceptance. Rejected by her parents, unsuccessful in her relationships, constantly feeling like she wasn't enough. Then I found an entry from about 10 years ago. "I met James today. He's kind, he's successful. He's not like the other men. I think this could be different. I think he could make me happy. I have to make this work. I have to show everyone, show my mother, that I can have the perfect life, that I'm worthy, that I'm not the disappointment she always said I was. And another from 5 years ago, who got married. It was perfect. The wedding was in all the right magazines. My mother actually looked impressed for once. I thought that was what I needed, to prove to her that I was successful. But even now, 3 years into marriage, I'm not happy. James is wonderful, but I can't relax. I can't stop trying to be perfect. What if he realizes I'm not enough? What if everyone realizes? The most recent entries were from just a few weeks ago. Margaret is moving in. James thinks it's the right thing to do. I should be grateful, he says. She raised him alone, he says. But all I can think is that now I have to be perfect in front of her too. Another person watching. Another person who will eventually see through me. Why does she have to be here? I finally had James to myself. Why does he have to complicate everything by bringing his mother into our perfect home? I've been cruel to Margaret. I know I have. But I don't know how to stop. Every time I see her, I see my own mother. That disappointed look, that judgment. So I attack first. I make her feel small so she can't make me feel small. I know it's wrong. But I don't know how to be any other way. The last entry was from the day before the dinner. I hate myself. I hate what I'm becoming. I hate that I'm turning into my mother, cold, critical, unable to show love without conditions. Margaret is a kind woman, and I'm destroying her to protect myself. But I can't stop. I don't know how to stop. I sat there in the darkness of Victoria's perfect sitting room, holding her private thoughts, and I cried. Not for me, for her. Victoria wasn't cruel because she was a bad person. She was cruel because she was terrified. Terrified of not being enough. Terrified of being abandoned like she'd been abandoned by her parents. Terrified that if anyone got too close, they would see what she really was, broken, insecure, unlovable. So she pushed everyone away first. She attacked. She controlled. She made herself untouchable. I recognized it because I'd seen it before. I'd worked with people like that at the nonprofit where I volunteered years ago. People whose pain had twisted into cruelty. People who needed help, not punishment. The question was, what was I going to do with this knowledge? I could use it against her. I could show her these entries and make her feel exposed and ashamed. I could say, see? I know what you are. I know you're scared and broken. That would make her suffer. Or I could do something different. I put the journal back exactly where I found it. I didn't tell James I'd read it. I didn't mention any of it to Victoria. Instead, I did something that would be much harder than revenge. I decided to show her kindness. The next morning, I woke up before anyone else. My face was bruised now, a dark purple mark spreading from my cheekbone toward my temple. It looked worse than it was, which is to say it looked terrible. I made coffee. I made Victoria's favorite breakfast. A kale and avocado smoothie, which I'd watched her make 100 times, and I left it on the counter with a note, Victoria. I'm sorry if my comment about the wine upset you. I didn't mean to overstep. I hope we can start fresh. Maggie. Then I went back upstairs and waited. I heard her come down around 9. I heard her discover the smoothie. I heard her find the note. I imagined her confusion, her guilt, her struggle to understand why I would be kind to her after she'd hurt me. She didn't come talk to me. Not that day. But the next morning, there was a post-it note on the kitchen counter. Thank you for the smoothie. I'm sorry about the glass. It was small. It wasn't enough. It didn't fix anything. But it was a beginning. The post-it note was just 2 sentences long, but it changed everything. Over the next week, small things began to shift in the house. Victoria stopped leaving demands for me on the kitchen counter. She started saying, please, and thank you. She even smiled at me once, though it was awkward. Like she was learning a new language and wasn't quite sure she had the grammar right. I continued being kind. Not the exhausted, resentful kind of kindness I'd been showing before, where I was serving out of obligation and fear. Real kindness. The kind that comes from genuinely wanting someone to be okay. I made Victoria's favorite meals. I asked her about her wellness business. I complimented her when she looked nice. And I did these things without expecting anything in return. Because I'd finally understood something important. Victoria couldn't give me what I needed. She was too broken to give anyone what they needed. But that didn't mean I had to be broken too. The turning point came on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, a salmon dish with roasted vegetables. When Victoria came in, she looked different. Her hair was down instead of in her usual perfect updo. She was wearing sweatpants instead of designer athleisure. She looked, in a word, vulnerable. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. My hands stilled on the knife I was using to chop herbs. In 5 weeks, she'd never asked me to talk. She'd only demanded things of me. "Of course," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. "Would you like some tea?" She nodded, and I made 2 cups of chamomile. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd thrown the glass at me just a week before, and Victoria began to cry. Not delicate tears, real messy, gut-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. "I'm so sorry," she said between tears. "I'm so sorry, Maggie. I don't have an excuse. There's no excuse for how I've treated you. I've been horrible. I know I have. And the glass, God, the glass. I could have seriously hurt you. I could have." She broke down completely. I didn't say anything. I just reached across the table and held her hand. "Why are you being nice to me?" she asked through her tears. "After everything I've done. Why aren't you furious with me?" I thought about how to answer. I thought about telling her I'd read her journal. I thought about saying all the things I could say to make her understand that I knew her pain. But that would have been about me. It would have been about proving how much I understood, how insightful I was. Instead, I said something simpler and more true. "Because I recognize pain when I see it," I said. "And I know that cruelty usually comes from people who are hurting so badly they don't know how to stop." Victoria looked at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. "How do you know that?" she whispered. "Experience," I said, "and because I was willing to look closer instead of just being angry." "You read my journal?" she said suddenly. It wasn't a question. My heart stopped. I hadn't expected her to know. I'd been so careful to put it back exactly how I'd found it. "Yes," I admitted, "I did. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. But I'm not sorry for what I learned." Victoria wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of mascara across her cheek. She looked like a little girl who'd been caught doing something wrong. "What did you think?" she asked. "When you read it, did you think I was a terrible person?" "No," I said. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I thought you were a person who'd been hurt, and who was hurting others because you didn't know what else to do. I thought you were scared. I thought you were lonely." "I am," Victoria said, and her voice was so small, so broken. "I'm so lonely, Maggie. I've been lonely my whole life. My parents never. They never made me feel like I was enough. And I thought if I was perfect, if I had the right house and the right husband and the right life, I'd finally feel okay. But I don't. I feel worse. Because now I have to keep pretending to be perfect, and every time I slip up, I'm terrified that James will realize I'm not worth it. That nobody is worth it." I squeezed her hand. "That's not true," I said. "You're worth it. You're worth so much more than perfection, Victoria. You're worth love. Real love. The kind that doesn't come with conditions." "I don't know how to do that," she said. "I don't know how to stop attacking people before they can attack me. I don't know how to let people in. I've been like this for so long." "Then we'll learn together," I said. "If you want to." Victoria looked up at me, and in her eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before: hope. Real, fragile, terrified hope. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "Why would you help me?" I thought about my husband Tom. I thought about how, near the end of his life, when he was afraid and angry and in pain, I'd stayed. I'd stayed because that's what love is sometimes, not grand gestures, but the simple act of staying when it would be easier to leave. "Because you're my family," I said. "And because I think you're a good person who's been trapped in a bad pattern. And because I know what it feels like to be judged and found wanting. And because nobody taught you a better way, so maybe I can help you learn one." Victoria cried again, but this time it was different. This time, it was the kind of crying that heals instead of breaks. After that day, everything shifted. James noticed it immediately. He came home that evening and saw his wife and his mother laughing together in the kitchen. Actually laughing, and his eyes got wet. He didn't ask what had happened. He just looked relieved, like a burden he'd been carrying had finally been set down. Victoria started therapy. She admitted to James that she'd been struggling with anxiety and perfectionism for years, and that she'd taken it out on people she loved. James was understanding, which surprised me. I think deep down, he'd always known something was wrong. He'd just been too afraid to address it. For the first time in 5 weeks, the house began to feel warm. Victoria still had moments where her old patterns emerged. There was a day when she snapped at me about a dish I'd washed. There was another day when she made a cutting comment about my appearance. But each time, she caught herself. Each time, she apologized. Each time, she tried to do better, and I helped her. I didn't enable her behavior. I gently called her out when she was slipping back into old habits. But I did it with compassion instead of judgment. The most remarkable thing happened 2 weeks later. Victoria and I were sitting on the back patio, drinking coffee in the morning sun. The October weather was perfect, crisp but not cold, the leaves turning gold and red, the world feeling new. I called my mother, Victoria said quietly. I didn't respond, I just waited. I told her that her criticism had hurt me my whole life, Victoria continued. I told her that I'd spent decades trying to be perfect because of her, and it had made me unhappy. I told her I was angry. I told her I needed her to acknowledge what she'd done. What did she say? I asked. She cried, Victoria said. She said she didn't realize. She said she was just trying to help me be better. We didn't fix everything in one phone call, but for the first time in my life, she listened to me. She didn't defend herself. She just listened. I felt tears prickling my own eyes. That took a lot of courage, I said. I learned it from you, Victoria said. She turned to look at me, and she was smiling. You showed me that it's possible to address the pain instead of just spreading it around. That night, Victoria made dinner. Not the usual smoothie bowls or the expensive takeout she usually ordered. Real food. A pasta dish with a homemade sauce that she'd clearly spent time on. She made it for all three of us, and when we sat down to eat, she and James held hands across the table. Thank you for coming to live with us, Maggie, James said. I know it hasn't been perfect, but I think we needed you here. I needed to be here too, I said honestly. I think maybe we all did. James looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned on his face. He realized, I think, that I'd been lonely too. That coming here hadn't been just about me needing care. It had been about all of us needing to heal. After dinner, Victoria hugged me. Not the awkward, distant hugs she'd given me when I first moved in. A real hug, the kind that said, I see you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. I'm going to do better, she whispered. Promise? We all are, I said. The next morning started like any other. I woke up just after 6 as I always do. My internal clock had been set that way for 40 years. It was a habit Tom and I had developed when we were first married and had to be up for work. Even now, years later, my body just knew. No alarm clock needed. I put on my robe and went downstairs to make coffee. The house was still dark, still quiet. I loved these early morning hours. They belonged to me. They were mine before the day started and demanded anything of me. I was standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the garden, when I heard Victoria scream. Not a small scream. Not a startled jump. A real, primal, from the depths of her being scream that made my coffee cup slip from my fingers and shatter on the tile floor. I didn't even notice the coffee burning my feet. I just ran. Victoria, I shouted, climbing the stairs as fast as my 68-year-old legs could carry me. Victoria, where are you? In here, she screamed. In the bathroom. James was already running out of their bedroom, looking panicked. We collided in the hallway, and he grabbed my arm to steady both of us, then rushed into the bathroom. Victoria was standing in front of the mirror, completely still, her hands covering her mouth. Her eyes were wide, staring at her reflection like she was seeing a ghost. What happened? James asked, rushing to her side. Are you hurt? Did you fall? Victoria didn't answer. She just kept staring at the mirror, her whole body trembling. Victoria, I said gently, stepping into the bathroom. What's wrong? Talk to us. She slowly lowered her hands from her mouth. Her eyes were filled with tears, and her lips were shaking. She looked from James to me, then back at the mirror. She whispered. What? James looked confused. What are you talking about? I'm old, she said again, louder this time. Her voice was filled with something I'd never heard before, wonder. Not horror. Wonder. She turned to look at me directly, and I could see her really looking, really seeing me, for the first time since I'd moved in. You're old too, she said, and there was no judgment in it, just observation. Realization. You're old and you're beautiful. I felt my eyes filling with tears. And I spent 3 months treating you like you were nobody. Victoria said, her voice breaking. I spent 3 months making you feel invisible and small, when all you were doing was trying to love me and be part of this family. I looked in this mirror, and I realized something. She turned back to the mirror and pointed at her reflection. That woman looking back at me. The perfect makeup, the perfect hair, the perfect face I've spent 20 years maintaining. She's empty. She's hollow. And I've wasted so much time trying to be her. Trying to maintain this image that I forgot to actually live. I forgot to actually love anyone. I forgot to let anyone love me. She touched the mirror gently, and her fingers left streaks on the glass. But you, she said, turning back to me. You're 68 years old, and you survived a glass being thrown at your face. And instead of hating me or leaving or making me suffer, you chose to understand me. You chose to help me. You chose to love me anyway. And you're more beautiful than I could ever be. Because your beauty comes from inside. It comes from kindness, from sacrifice, from choosing to see the best in people even when they don't deserve it. James had his arm around Victoria now, and he was crying too. I was crying, Victoria was crying. We were all standing in that bathroom at 6:30 in the morning crying. I think, Victoria said slowly, I think I've spent my whole life running from becoming my mother. And I became her instead. I became cold. I became critical. I became someone who measures a person's worth by how useful they are, how perfect they look, how much they contribute to my image. She looked directly at me, and I saw something shift in her eyes. A lightness, a release. I don't want to be that person anymore, she said. I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to look perfect while being hollow inside. I want to look like you when I'm old, Maggie. I want to have earned these wrinkles. I want to have lived enough and loved enough that it shows on my face. You still have time, I said gently. You're only 42. I know, Victoria said. But I almost didn't realize that until just now. I almost spent the rest of my life chasing an image instead of a life. Thank you for showing me the difference. She hugged me. Really hugged me. Not the tentative, learning how to do it hug from a few weeks ago, but a real embrace. And I hugged her back. James hugged us both, and for a moment, the three of us just stood there in the bathroom of that marble house, holding each other, finally, like a real family. That morning changed everything again. Victoria made a decision. She was going to stop the wellness business. She was going to stop posting pictures of her perfect life on social media. She was going to stop spending thousands of dollars every month trying to maintain an image that was slowly suffocating her. Instead, she was going to start over. She signed up for a pottery class. She joined a book club. She started volunteering at a women's shelter, teaching financial literacy to women trying to get back on their feet. She cut her hair shorter. She stopped wearing makeup every single day. Some days she wore yoga pants and didn't care if they matched her shirt, and she was happier than I'd ever seen her. The house changed too. The sterile marble and whites and grays started to give way to warmth. Victoria brought home art from local galleries. She hung photos of us on the walls. Real photos, not the carefully staged family portraits. Photos of us laughing, playing in the garden, being silly. One day she brought home a photo from when I first moved in. The day I arrived, looking nervous and hopeful. And she framed it. She hung it in the living room, and every time someone asked about it, she told them the story of how that nervous old woman in the photo had saved her life. Not by doing anything special, she'd always add. Just by being kind when she could have been cruel. The most surprising thing was what happened with James's extended family. Victoria invited my sister Helen and her husband Robert to stay with us for a week. She'd never been warm to my family before, but now she went out of her way to make them comfortable. She cooked their favorite meals. She asked them real questions and actually listened to their answers. She even sat and looked through photo albums with Helen, asking her about memories and family history. One evening, Helen pulled me aside. "What happened to Victoria?" she asked. "I don't understand. She used to barely acknowledge me, and now she's asking me about my grandchildren and showing genuine interest." I smiled. "She decided to stop running from her pain and start living with it instead," I said. "She decided that being loved was more important than being perfect." "You did that," Helen said. "You fixed her." "No," I said. "Victoria fixed herself. I just showed her it was possible." By the time 6 months had passed since I moved in, the house felt like a home. Real laughter echoed through those marble halls. Real conversations happened at the dinner table. Real love existed between us. Victoria still had hard days. There were still moments when she'd snap at someone, or make a cutting comment, or try to control something. But she caught herself now. She apologized. She kept working on it. Healing isn't linear, and redemption isn't a destination you reach and then stay at. It's a journey, a daily practice, a commitment to being better than you were yesterday. One evening, Victoria and I were sitting on the patio again. It was spring now, months later. The flowers were blooming. The world had turned over, and so had we. "I want to tell you something," Victoria said. "Something I've never told anyone." "What's that?" I asked. I'm grateful, she said. Not just for what you did for me, but for who you are. For showing me that it's possible to be strong and gentle at the same time. For showing me that real beauty comes from living a real life. Not from maintaining an image. For showing me that the most powerful thing we can do sometimes is just stay. Just love people even when they don't deserve it. Just keep showing up. I reached over and took her hand. You're going to be okay, I said, more than okay. You're going to have a beautiful life. We're going to have a beautiful life, Victoria corrected me. All three of us. And I'm never going to take that for granted again. That night, I lay in my guest room, which James had suggested I think of as my permanent room, my real room in the house, and I thought about the journey we'd all taken. From the moment I'd arrived, nervous and lonely, to this moment now, where I felt truly part of a family again. I thought about how one moment can change everything. How a glass thrown in anger can become the beginning of healing. How cruelty can be transformed into compassion if someone is willing to look deeper, to understand the pain behind it, and to choose love anyway. I thought about my daughter-in-law, who was no longer my antagonist but my friend, my family, my daughter in the truest sense of the word, and I was grateful. Not everything in life is a happy ending, even when you do the right thing. I realized this on a Tuesday morning in late spring, about 8 months after I'd moved in. I was in the kitchen making breakfast. Victoria's favorite now, believe it or not, was my simple scrambled eggs with toast and fresh fruit. She'd stopped asking for her complicated green smoothies months ago, when I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It wasn't the kind of pain you ignore. It was the kind that stopped me mid-motion, made me grip the counter, and made me very aware of my own mortality. I sat down slowly in one of the kitchen chairs and waited for it to pass. It did, after a few minutes, fading to a dull ache. I told myself it was nothing. Indigestion probably. Or stress. Or just the normal aches and pains of being 68 years old. I didn't tell anyone, but over the next few weeks it happened again and again. Always the same sharp pain, always in my chest. Always leaving me feeling slightly afraid. I was afraid because I knew what it meant. I was afraid because I'd just finally found a home, and the thought of leaving it terrified me. I was afraid because I couldn't bear the idea of putting Victoria through loss again, after she'd just learned how to love. So I went to my doctor alone. I didn't tell James. I didn't tell Victoria. The tests came back, and Dr. Padel sat across from me with a sympathetic smile that I'd seen before when Tom was sick. Your heart is stressed, she said gently. You have some minor arrhythmia, and your blood pressure is elevated. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but it's a warning sign, Maggie. Your body is telling you that something needs to change. What kind of changes? I asked. Less stress, she said, more rest, medication to help regulate your heart rhythm. And I'm going to be honest with you, because I think you deserve honesty. You need to think about what you're carrying emotionally. Stress and worry can literally break your heart. I thought about Victoria, about James, about the months I'd spent trying to help Victoria heal, trying to be strong, trying to show her that compassion was possible. I'd poured everything I had into that transformation, and it had worked. But it had also exhausted me in ways I didn't fully understand until that moment. How long do I have? I asked quietly. With proper care and management. Many years, Dr. Patel said. But without making changes, and if you continue under stress, I can't promise you anything. Your heart has to come first, Maggie. Your health has to come first. I filled the prescription. I took the medication. I didn't tell anyone. But things started to change, and not in the way I wanted. I had less energy. Activities that used to be easy, cooking, gardening, cleaning, became exhausting. I found myself needing to sit down more often. My hands would shake sometimes. I'd get out of breath walking up the stairs. Victoria noticed first. Are you okay? She asked one morning, finding me sitting on the patio just staring out at nothing. You seem, I don't know, quieter than usual. I'm fine, I said automatically. Just tired. But she didn't believe me. Victoria, who had learned to pay attention to people, who had learned to see beyond the surface, knew something was wrong. She sat down next to me and took my hand. Talk to me, she said simply. And I broke. I told her about the doctor's appointment, about the heart stress, about the warning, about the fear that I'd spent so much energy helping her that I'd forgotten to take care of myself. Victoria cried. She held my hand and cried, and I could see the guilt washing over her. This is my fault, she said. The stress of dealing with me, the stress of trying to help me fix my life, it's broken your heart. It's literally broken your heart. No, I said firmly. This is not your fault. My heart was probably already stressed before I came here. This is just life. This is what happens when we get older. Our bodies start to fail us. But if you hadn't come here, Victoria said, if you hadn't had to deal with me and my abuse and my issues, then I would have been alone in that big empty house, worrying about dying alone, I finished. I would have had nothing to do but think about my loneliness and my fear. That's not better, Victoria. That's worse. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. That evening, James and Victoria sat me down. They'd been talking, they said. They decided something. They wanted me to see a cardiologist, a specialist. They were going to pay for it, and they were going to make some changes in the house, starting immediately. What kind of changes? I asked. We're hiring help, James said. A housekeeper, someone to come in 3 times a week, and a cook. Someone to prepare meals. You're not doing that anymore. But I like cooking. I started to protest. You like a lot of things that are going to strain your heart, Victoria said gently. And we like having you alive more than we like having home, cooked meals. So you're going to rest. You're going to take care of yourself. And we're going to take care of you. It was strange, being on the receiving end of care. For so long, I'd been the caregiver. I'd taken care of Tom. I'd taken care of my son. I'd taken care of Victoria. The idea of someone taking care of me felt foreign, uncomfortable, almost wrong. But I was also tired, bone tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying things too long. I started letting them help me. The housekeeper came on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The cook, a kind woman named Patricia who made incredible meals, came every other day. Suddenly my days had space in them, empty space where I used to be busy. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I wandered around the house like a ghost. I picked up books and put them down. I looked out windows. I sat in the garden. I was restless, uncomfortable, like my body had been so accustomed to work that it didn't know how to just exist. But slowly, something shifted. I started to actually rest. Not the kind of rest that comes after work is done, but real rest. The kind where you let your body and mind just settle. And in that rest, I began to heal. 3 weeks into my new routine, Victoria found me crying in the garden. What's wrong? She asked, sitting down next to me on the bench. Nothing's wrong, I said, wiping my eyes. I'm crying because I'm happy. Because I finally understand what you've been learning. Victoria, what's that? She asked. That self-care isn't selfish, I said. That taking care of yourself isn't a luxury for other people to give you. It's a necessity. And that sometimes the most important thing we can do is say no. Say no to doing everything. Say no to being strong all the time. Say no to sacrificing ourselves for others. Victoria smiled, and there was something knowing in that smile. Took you long enough to learn that, she said gently. I know, I said. I spent so much time teaching you how to take care of yourself that I forgot I needed to learn the same lesson. We teach best what we most need to learn, Victoria said. It was something her therapist had told her, and now she was sharing it with me. That's when I realized something important. Helping Victoria hadn't damaged me. It had revealed that I was already damaged. It had shown me the cracks that were already there. And that wasn't Victoria's fault. That was just the reality of being human. We're all a little bit broken. We're all carrying things we don't know we're carrying. The real gift wasn't that I'd healed Victoria. The real gift was that by trying to heal Victoria, I'd learned that I needed healing too. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a new rhythm. I rested more. I let others care for me. I watched Victoria continue to grow and change. I watched James learn to speak up, to set boundaries, to be a better husband and son. I watched the family I'd thought was broken actually become whole. And I learned an important truth. Sometimes compassion costs us something. Sometimes loving someone requires that we examine ourselves, our own pain, our own limitations. Sometimes helping others means admitting that we need help too. I had a second cardiologist appointment. The specialist said my heart was improving with the medication and rest. But you have to keep this up, he said. You have to take care of yourself, Mrs. Whitmore. You have people who love you. Don't make them lose you by ignoring your own health. When I left his office, I thought about what he'd said. I had people who loved me. Just a year ago, I wasn't sure anyone did. I was alone in a big house, afraid of dying alone. Now I had a son and a daughter-in-law who cared whether I lived or died. I had friends who visited regularly. I had a life that mattered. And it had cost me something, my pride, my independence. My belief that I had to be strong all the time. It had cost me my health, at least temporarily. It had cost me the comfort of thinking that I was okay on my own. But what I'd gained was worth the cost. That evening, the three of us sat down to dinner together. Patricia had made a beautiful meal, nothing too heavy, nothing that would strain my heart. We ate and talked and laughed. Victoria told a story about something that happened at the women's shelter. James shared good news about the company, and I sat there, eating and listening and being present, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude. Pure, simple gratitude for being alive, for being part of this family, for having taken the risk to help someone, even when it cost me something. Because that's what I'd finally understood. Real love always costs something. Real compassion requires sacrifice. But the sacrifice is worth it, because love is the only thing in this life that actually matters. A year had passed since the night Victoria threw the glass at my face. I know exactly how long it had been because Victoria marked it. She actually created a calendar notification that came up on my phone. 1 year, the day everything changed. And she'd made a special dinner to celebrate it. Which is funny, in a way, because what was there to celebrate? The night that nearly destroyed our family. The moment that revealed how broken we all were. But that's what Victoria had learned: to celebrate the hard moments. The moments when everything breaks open, and you finally have to deal with the pieces instead of just stepping around them. The dinner was beautiful. Victoria had learned to cook. Really cook. Not just assemble things, and she made a roasted chicken with herbs, roasted vegetables, and a salad with homemade vinaigrette. James opened a good bottle of wine. We sat at the table, not the formal dining table with the cold marble, but the smaller, warmer kitchen table where we'd started having real conversations. "I want to thank you both," Victoria said, raising her glass, "for not giving up on me, for showing me that people can change, for proving that compassion is stronger than judgment." James squeezed her hand. "You did the hard work," he said. "We just supported you while you figured it out." Victoria shook her head. "No," she said, looking directly at me. "Maggie did the hard work. She chose to understand me instead of hate me. She chose to help me instead of hurt me. She showed me that there's another way to live. I just showed you what was always possible," I said gently. "You did the choosing, Victoria. Every day, you choose to be better than you were. That's all any of us can do." We ate and talked and laughed. Victoria told us about her volunteer work at the shelter, about a woman she'd been mentoring who was finally getting back on her feet. James talked about a new product the company was developing. I told them about the book club I'd joined, about the friends I was making there. My health had stabilized. The medication was working. I still got tired more easily than I used to. But my heart was strong. The cardiologist said I was doing everything right. I was resting enough, I was moving enough, I was taking care of myself in a way I never had before. But the most important thing was that I'd learned to ask for help, to accept care, to admit that I couldn't do everything myself. That was the real healing, I think. Not just for me, but for my whole family. After dinner, Victoria asked if I wanted to go for a walk with her. We'd made this a habit over the past months, evening walks around the neighborhood. It was good for my heart, and it gave us time to talk. The neighborhood was beautiful in the late spring. The trees were full and green. Gardens overflowed with flowers. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I got a call today," Victoria said as we walked. "From my mother." I felt her take my arm, and we linked elbows like old friends. "How is she?" I asked. "Better," Victoria said. "We've been talking more regularly. I've been helping her understand how her parenting affected me, and she's been learning to listen instead of defend. It's slow, and it's hard, but we're building something real. For the first time in my life, I feel like my mother actually sees me." "That's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. "It wouldn't have happened if you hadn't shown me how to do it," Victoria continued. "You showed me that understanding someone doesn't mean accepting their bad behavior. It means seeing the pain behind it and choosing to respond with compassion anyway. That's what I'm doing with my mother now, and she's starting to do it with me." We walked in silence for a while. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. Neighbors waved hello from their porches. Dogs barked from yards. The world felt normal and good. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said suddenly. "Something I probably should have told you months ago." "What's that?" I asked. "I'm pregnant," she said. I stopped walking. I turned to look at her, and I must have had a shocked expression on my face. Because she laughed. "Really?" I said. "Victoria, that's wonderful. Is it?" She asked, and there was uncertainty in her voice. "I was terrified to tell you." I was terrified you'd think I was being selfish, bringing a child into this situation. I know I have my own issues to work through. I know I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect, I said. But you're ready, Victoria. You're so much more ready than you were a year ago. You know how to ask for help. You know how to admit when you're struggling. You know how to love without trying to control. Those are the things that matter. She squeezed my arm, and I could feel her relax. James doesn't even know yet, she said. I wanted to tell you first. I wanted to thank you first, because without you, I wouldn't be in a place where I feel ready for this. Well, then let's go tell him, I said. I think he's going to be very happy. The next few months were filled with a kind of joy I hadn't experienced in years. Victoria's pregnancy moved forward smoothly. She was cautious, taking care of herself in a way she never had before. Not obsessing over it, not trying to control every variable, but genuinely taking care of both herself and the baby growing inside her. James was beside himself with happiness. He'd wanted a child for years, but Victoria hadn't been ready. Now, with her healed, with their relationship on solid ground, it was finally happening. I became something I never expected to become, a grandmother, in waiting. I started thinking about the nursery. I started knitting little blankets. I attended doctor's appointments. I sat and listened while Victoria talked about her fears and her excitement. And watching Victoria become a mother was like watching a flower bloom. She was learning to be gentle with herself and with her child. She was learning that motherhood wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up and loving and doing your best and apologizing when you failed. 3 months into the pregnancy, Victoria had a difficult day. She'd been sick all morning, and by afternoon she was exhausted and emotional. She found me in the garden and just sat down next to me and cried. I'm going to mess this up, she said. I'm going to have this baby, and I'm going to mess up, and it's going to be my fault that my child has issues and problems. I didn't tell her she was being silly. I didn't tell her everything would be fine. Instead, I told her the truth. Yes, I said. You're probably going to mess up sometimes. Every mother does. But you're going to mess up a little less than you would have a year ago because you've done the work to understand yourself. And when you do mess up, you're going to apologize to your child and model what it looks like to take responsibility and try to do better. That's the best gift a parent can give a child, not perfection but growth. Victoria leaned against me, and I put my arm around her. You're going to be a wonderful mother, I said. Not because you're perfect, but because you care so much about not being a bad one that you're always going to be trying to do better. One evening, as I was sitting on the patio reading, James sat down next to me. It was unusual. We didn't often have time alone together. Victoria was usually there, or I was resting, or he was at work. I want to talk to you about something, he said. I put down my book. What is it? I owe you an apology, he said quietly. A big one. For not standing up to Victoria when she was treating you poorly. For letting my wife hurt my mother and not doing anything about it. James. I started to say, but he held up a hand. Please let me finish, he said. For months, I told myself that I was keeping the peace. That if I spoke up, it would make things worse. But the truth is, I was being a coward. I was too afraid of my wife's anger to protect my mother. And that's inexcusable. I thought about James. How lost he'd looked during those early months. How trapped between loyalty to his wife and love for his mother. How he'd wanted to help but didn't know how. You were caught in an impossible situation, I said gently. Your wife was hurting and your mother was being hurt. You couldn't fix that with words, James. You would have just made it worse. What fixed it was Victoria deciding to change. That was always going to be her journey. But I should have tried, James said. I should have said something. Maybe, I said. But what I've learned this year is that we all do the best we can with what we know. You didn't know how to help then, but you know now. And you're showing up for your wife, you're supporting your mother. You're going to be a father who speaks up and protects his child. That's what matters. James hugged me, and I felt him relax. Thank you for being so understanding, he said. That's what family does, I said. We forgive each other. We understand that we're all broken in different ways, and we keep showing up for each other anyway. 6 months into Victoria's pregnancy, she threw a small dinner party. Not for her friends this time. She'd mostly stopped trying to maintain friendships with people who made her feel like she had to be perfect. Instead, it was for the people who actually mattered. Susan came, my dear friend who'd helped me see that I needed to stand up for myself. Helen and Robert. A couple of Victoria's friends from the shelter, Patricia, the cook, who had become something like a friend to all of us. Victoria had insisted on cooking the meal herself, with James's help. She moved carefully around the kitchen, her belly round and prominent now. Free, she was glowing in a way that had nothing to do with makeup and everything to do with genuine happiness. During dinner, she stood up to make a toast. "I want to thank everyone here for being part of my journey," she said. "A year ago I was a very different person. I was unhappy, and I made everyone around me unhappy. I was cruel. I was selfish. I was broken in ways I didn't even understand." She looked at me, and her eyes were warm and grateful. But then my mother-in-law moved in, and she showed me something I'd never seen before. That it's possible to be strong and kind at the same time. That it's possible to understand someone who's hurting you. That it's possible to choose love, even when it would be easier to choose anger or revenge. Victoria's voice got shaky, but she continued. "Because of Maggie, because of her willingness to see the best in me when I was being my worst, I found my way back to myself. Or maybe I found my way to myself for the first time. Either way, I'm a different person now. I'm ready to be a mother. I'm ready to be a wife who shows up emotionally. I'm ready to have real relationships with real people." She raised her glass. "So this toast is to Maggie Whitmore. To my mother-in-law. To the woman who taught me that redemption is always possible, and that the most powerful force in the world is not anger or judgment, but understanding." Everyone raised their glasses and toasted. I felt tears in my eyes, not sad tears, but grateful ones. Overwhelmed ones. The kind of tears that come when you realize that your life has become something beautiful that you never expected. After dinner, as we were clearing the table, Victoria pulled me aside. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to be honest with me." "Of course," I said. "Do you ever regret moving here?" she asked. "Do you ever think about how much easier your life would have been if you'd just stayed in your own house?" I thought about that question seriously. I thought about my lonely house. I thought about the fear I'd felt about growing old alone. I thought about the woman I was before, the one who smiled but didn't really feel joy, the one who helped everyone but didn't know how to ask for help herself. "No," I said honestly, "I don't regret it for a second. Moving here was the best thing I could have done. It saved my life, Victoria. Not just my physical life, though taking care of myself has been important for that, but my emotional life, my spiritual life, my sense of purpose and belonging." "You've given me that," Victoria hugged me. "You gave it to me first," she said. "You showed me how." That night I sat in my room, my real room now, not just a guest room, and I thought about the journey we'd all been on. A year ago I had been hurt and angry. Victoria had been cruel and broken. James had been caught between them, unable to help. And now we were a family. A real one. Not perfect but real. We showed up for each other. We forgave each other. We kept trying to do better. I thought about the glass that had started it all. That moment of violence and violation. That moment when I could have chosen revenge, or bitterness, or resentment. And I thought about how glad I was that I'd chosen something else instead, because compassion had changed everything. Not just for Victoria, but for all of us. It had healed her. It had healed me. It had brought our family closer together. And now, there was going to be a new life. A baby. A child who would grow up in a home filled with love and understanding instead of judgment and fear. A child who would have a mother who knew how to ask for help, who understood pain, who had learned to be gentle with herself and others. I fell asleep that night thinking about that baby, about the world they would be born into, about the love that was waiting for them, and I was grateful. So grateful. 3 months later, on a bright autumn morning, Victoria gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Her name is Emma. She has Victoria's blonde hair and James's gentle eyes, and when I held her for the first time in the hospital, I felt something shift in my chest, not the pain I'd felt before, but something warm and full of purpose. I'm a grandmother, not a step-grandmother or a mother-in-law filling the role. A real grandmother. And while I'll never replace the one Emma lost to distance and estrangement, I'm here now. I'm present. And I'm going to do everything I can to show this little girl what love looks like. Victoria recovered well from the birth. She was gentle with herself in a way I'd never seen before. She didn't rush back to being perfect. She let herself be tired. She let herself cry. She let herself ask for help. And she was a good mother. Not a perfect mother, but a real one. A present one. A woman who loved her daughter fiercely and wasn't afraid to show it. I watched her one day, about a week after Emma was born, when the baby wouldn't stop crying. Victoria was exhausted, at the end of her rope, and I could see the frustration building in her. For a moment, I wondered if the old Victoria, the one who lashed out when things became difficult, would emerge. Instead, Victoria took a deep breath. She put the baby down gently in her crib. She stepped out of the room. She came and found me in the kitchen. "I need a break," she said simply. "Can you hold Emma for a bit?" "Of course," I said, and I watched her go upstairs, probably to take a shower or just sit quietly for a few minutes. That's when I knew for sure Victoria was going to break the cycle. She was going to raise a daughter who knew that it was okay to ask for help. A daughter who wouldn't learn that strength meant suffering in silence. A daughter who would grow up knowing that her mother loved her enough to take care of herself. As I sit here now, writing this story down, I'm thinking about what I came here to tell you. I came to tell you about the night my daughter-in-law threw a glass at my face. I came to tell you about betrayal and hurt and abuse. And those things are all true. They happened. They were real and painful, and they changed my life. But that's not the whole story. The whole story is about what happens when we choose compassion instead of revenge. When we decide that understanding someone is more important than punishing them. When we take the risk of being vulnerable and showing kindness to someone who's hurt us. The whole story is about how broken people can become whole, how cruelty can be transformed into kindness, how one person's willingness to see the best in someone can actually help that person become their best self. I've spent 70 years on this earth. I've seen a lot of things. I've experienced loss and joy and fear and hope, but I can honestly say that the most powerful experience of my life has been this: watching someone change because I chose to love them anyway. Victoria didn't deserve my compassion. She threw a glass at my face and called me a maid and made me feel invisible for months. By any reasonable standard, I owed her nothing. I could have left. I could have demanded an apology. I could have told everyone what she'd done and turned them against her. But I didn't. And that choice, that single choice to understand instead of condemn, changed all of our lives. I want to be very clear about something, though. Because I know some of you listening might be thinking, "Margaret, why didn't you leave? Why did you stay and accept abuse?" That's a fair question, and the answer is complicated. Part of me stayed because I was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of starting over. Afraid that if I left, I'd have nothing and no one. That fear was real, and it was wrong. Fear made me accept things I shouldn't have accepted. But another part of me stayed because I recognized something in Victoria. I recognized pain. I recognized someone who was hurting so badly that she was hurting everyone around her. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I could help her find another way. If you're in a situation where someone is abusing you, I want you to know this: you deserve better. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You don't have to stay. You don't have to suffer through abuse hoping that person will change. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave. But I also want you to know this: if you see someone who's hurting, who's lashing out, who's broken, don't immediately judge them. Try to understand them. Try to see the pain behind the cruelty. Not so you'll accept being hurt, but so you can respond with wisdom and compassion instead of just anger and revenge. Sometimes that understanding can change everything. I'm back in the kitchen now, where so much of this story happened. It's autumn again, exactly 2 years since I moved in. The leaves are turning gold and red. The weather is getting cooler. Emma is sleeping in her bassinet nearby, and I can hear James and Victoria upstairs, laughing about something. I think about where I was 2 years ago, alone in a big empty house, afraid, grieving my husband, not knowing what my life was for anymore. And I think about where I am now. Part of a family, a grandmother, a woman with purpose and meaning and love surrounding me. The path between those two places went through a glass being thrown at my face. It went through months of being treated poorly. It went through a moment where I had to decide, am I going to respond to cruelty with cruelty, or am I going to respond with compassion? I chose compassion, and it was the best decision I've ever made. Not because everything immediately became perfect, it didn't. Victoria still has hard days. James still sometimes struggles with speaking up. I still get tired, and my heart still needs watching. We're all still broken in our own ways. But we're broken together now, and somehow that makes all the difference. Let me tell you what really happened behind closed doors. The truth that nobody talks about. The truth that makes people uncomfortable. The truth is that most of the people hurting us are hurting too. Most of the people who are cruel and mean and abusive have themselves been hurt. Most of them are doing the best they can with what they know, and what they know is pain. That doesn't make it okay. It doesn't excuse behavior, but it does mean that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, there's a possibility for healing. The truth is that compassion is the strongest force in the world, stronger than anger, stronger than judgment, stronger than revenge. Compassion has the power to transform people and situations in ways that anger never can. The truth is that we're all doing the best we can. We're all broken. We're all trying. And the most important thing we can do for each other is to see each other's brokenness and choose love anyway. The truth is that redemption is always possible. It's possible for people who've hurt us. It's possible for us when we've hurt others. It's possible for entire families, entire communities, entire systems. But only if we're willing to understand each other. Only if we're willing to see the pain beneath the behavior. Only if we're willing to choose compassion. That's what happened behind closed doors in this house. That's what changed everything. Not a grand gesture. Not a dramatic moment of justice. Just a woman choosing to understand instead of hate. Just a woman choosing to help instead of hurt. Just a woman choosing to love. And that love changed the life of a woman who thought she was irredeemable. And that woman's healing changed her husband's life. And their healing created a safe place for a baby to be born. And that baby will grow up in a home filled with understanding and compassion instead of judgment and fear. One act of compassion. That's all it took. So if you're listening to this story, and you're thinking about someone who's hurt you, I want to invite you to do something. I want to invite you to try to understand them. Not to excuse what they did, but to understand where the cruelty came from. What pain they might be carrying. What brokenness led them to break you. And then, if you're brave enough, I want to invite you to choose compassion. Maybe it will work. Maybe the person will change like Victoria did. Maybe they'll realize what they've been doing, and they'll start doing better. Or maybe it won't work. Maybe they'll continue to hurt you, and the compassionate thing to do will be to remove yourself from their life. Either way, you'll know you tried. You'll know you chose the higher road. You'll know that you responded to cruelty with love instead of more cruelty. And that makes you different. That makes you the kind of person who has the power to change the world. Because the world doesn't need more anger. It doesn't need more revenge. It doesn't need more people willing to hurt each other. What it needs is more people like me. More people willing to understand. More people willing to see the pain beneath the behavior. More people willing to love anyway. 2 years ago, when my daughter-in-law threw that glass at my face, I didn't know it would change my life. I didn't know it would lead to healing and redemption and love. I just knew I was hurt and angry and afraid. But I made a choice. I chose to look deeper. I chose to understand instead of condemn. I chose to help instead of hurt. And now I'm sitting in a kitchen that feels like home. I'm holding a baby granddaughter who will grow up in a house filled with love. I'm part of a family that loves each other fiercely and works hard to understand each other. I'm a woman who knows that her life matters, that her presence in this world makes a difference. All because I chose compassion. I don't know what your story is. I don't know what hurt you're carrying. I don't know what cruelty you've experienced or what anger you're holding on to. But I know this. If you're willing to choose compassion, if you're willing to understand instead of judge, if you're willing to see the pain in people and respond with love instead of more pain, everything can change. That's what really happened behind closed doors. That's the real story. And now, I'm asking you to be part of the next chapter.